Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chalkbeat's annual legislative preview. I'm Melanie Asmar, Bureau Chief for Chalkbeat, Colorado. Chalkbeat is a nonprofit news organization covering the story of education in America, and this work includes chronicling decisions made by state lawmakers that impact the lives of teachers and students, which is why we're so happy to host this yearly conversation about education issues that are likely to surface in the upcoming legislative session. Be sure to sign up for Chalkbeat's free email newsletter if you haven't already to continue following our coverage of the session. We'll provide a link in the chat for you. I want to mention that this conversation will be recorded and emailed to all attendees afterward. The chat box is closed, but you can use the Q&A box on Zoom to submit your questions for our panel or to let us know about any technical issues. I'd like to offer a special thanks to our event sponsor, the Colorado Education Association. And thank you to our event partner, Young Invincibles. I'm now going to hand it off to our moderators, Jason and Efren, to introduce themselves. Jason.
Hello, all. Thank you all so much for joining us. I am Jason Gonzalez, and I cover higher education and education issues in the legislature. This is always one of my favorite events, and I'm really excited, always really excited to have a student moderator on this panel. So, Efren, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm so honored to be here. My name is Eaton Garcia, he, him pronouns. I'm a graduate student at the Colorado School of Public Health. I'm a doctorate student specifically, but I also wear a couple other hats. I'm also a policy analyst at the Bell Policy Center, and I am also a part of the Student Voice Coalition with Young Invincibles. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here.
All right. Thank you so much, Efren. We are now going to introduce our panelists. So it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Janice Marchman, who is a Democrat from Loveland, and Senator Scott Bright, who is a Republican from Platteville. Then, Efren, if you want to go ahead and introduce the rest of our panelists.
Yes, happy to do so. Following, we have Representative Meghan Lukens, a Democrat from Steamboat Springs. We also have Representative Matthew Martinez, a Democrat from Monte Vista. And we also have Representative Lori Garcia Sander, a Republican from Eaton.
All right, so we're just going to jump right into questions. For the audience, I want to, just so you know, we have someone in the background who will yell time, so to keep us moving along. So don't be surprised if you might hear that. So first things first, let's do a lightning round for each of you, and this is for all of our panelists. In a few sentences, please let us know one education bill or priority you would like to address this session and why you'll have about a minute to answer. So let's start with Senator Marchman.
Great. Thanks, Jason and Caroline. Thanks, everyone, for being here. We have a budget for shortfall again, and we know from adequacy studies that we have a lot more to go with funding. So a big push this year is going to be keeping our education funding for K-12 as solid as it can be. And so I think that's what a lot of our attention will be on. I don't think that if we're able to do that, we're able to do much else in the way of education funding. So most of what we're looking at this year in terms of policy is around changes, levers, rather than kind of fiscally driven kind of solutions. So I'll stop there for everyone else.
Yeah, we'll just go down the line. Senator Bright.
Thanks everyone for being here today. It's great to visit with you all today. My priorities come from the early childhood realm of education. And as Senator Marchman noted, we're in a bit of a budget crisis. We have a lot of things that we'd love to do and not quite enough money to do it all. So the name of the game is to become more efficient with the services that we provide. We don't want to cut anything. But maybe if we can start doing some things a little bit more efficiently, we can make that happen. So I've got a few different legislative initiatives inside of the early childhood space that will make those departments and those programs a little bit more efficient. And hopefully we can still continue to provide services for all those families in Colorado that need them. Looking forward to this session.
Representative Lukens.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Chalkbeat, excited to be here. I am zooming in from Steamboat Springs, where it is snowing hard, and I hope that it is snowing wherever you all are. This upcoming legislative session, I definitely agree with what our fellow Senate colleagues have said, but it is going to be focused on the budget. So, this legislative session, I will be thinking a lot about the School Finance Act and how we can ensure that our schools are getting the funding they deserve. We are in a significant budget deficit, budget shortfall because of just a number of factors. There are so many different things that the state budget pays for, and prices are getting more expensive for everyone in the state of Colorado, including the state's budget. So we are constitutionally required to run a balanced budget, unlike our friends at the federal level. And so with that, that certainly makes some tough decisions for this upcoming legislative session. But I know those of us
I'm
on the education committees are very dedicated to promoting and supporting our students and educators at every turn.
Thank you. Representative Martinez.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us here. I will say ditto to everything my colleagues said. Preserving K through 12 education funding, I think, is paramount, especially in this tight budget year, and being able to make sure that we are delivering for our students, our faculty, and our school districts, I think, is paramount. I'm working on two different bills. One is to try to expand the blindness screening to having that done a little bit earlier. That way we can catch them earlier. We can get them the help and assistance earlier than needed. And then really trying to fix this problem with cough funding for incarcerated students that has come up with the resurgence of Pell Grants. So thank you.
And Representative Garcia Sander.
Thank you. I'm so excited to see a few snowflakes in the air where I am. So thanks everybody for joining us. My ditto to everything that's already been said. So I'm not going to touch on the budget and shortfalls and all of that. But I think what we can do, and the nice thing is looking around at my colleagues, is we are all in it for education and for kids. We're all still tightly connected to our educational communities. And so my priority is really reducing regulations and figuring out where can we make education the place that we want our kids to be, our teachers to be, our administrators to want to continue. One of my stressors has been for the last 10 years that we are experiencing a dearth in our workforce, and we need to make education a great place to be employed and for our kids to want to be again. And so reducing regulation, I think, is a big place to start that in our schools. So thanks.
Thank you all. All right, Afrin.
Yeah. So this is another lightning round question. You each all have a minute to answer. So as a graduate student and young professional myself, I am seeing my peers face more financial challenges than ever in meeting basic needs, managing student loans, and securing housing. Colorado also has two reports that say the state needs billions more to adequately teach K through 12 students. What are each of your views on revenue raising measures such as a graduated income tax? We can go ahead and get started. I'll go first on my screen. I see you, Senator Bright. You can.
Thanks so much. And thank you for the question. Colorado is a expensive place to live, one of the most expensive in the United States. And I will chalk that up to the fact that we all want to live here. I can understand the draw to Colorado, simple supply and demand equation there. So when more folks want to live here, it becomes more expensive to live here. There are lots of things that drive up the cost of living. And so we can address that in a number of different ways. We can take a look at the revenue that it takes to pay those costs. We can also take a look at the expenses that Colorado families incur on a monthly basis, and we can try to approach those from both directions to try to make it more affordable to live here, as well as make sure that those folks who do live here earn incomes that can support those expenses.
Thank you. Senator Marchman.
Thank you. Yeah, so I do I do definitely support changing our tax structure to better serve students. I will also say one of the huge things in Colorado we struggle with is our insurance issues. Those are both property, commercial, and residential, as well as health insurance. And it's a huge problem. I ran a bill last year to study universal health care to see what single payer might look like. Because we're running into huge affordability issues, specifically within the next 6 weeks, as folks are being dealt with new bills from their health insurance that are 4 times as high, especially in rural communities. So those are both things. And then the last thing I'll say about education funding is as long as we continue to have only property tax determine our education funding, it's going to be unsubstantial and inequitable. And so I support all kinds of ideas to try to figure out more creative ways to do that. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Representative Lukens.
Thank you for this question. This upcoming legislative session, we are going to be focused on saving people money. So we certainly are hearing across the board, and I can assure you that we are experiencing it as well, that affordability is top of mind for folks in Colorado. And so there are a number of bills in the education space and not in the education space that will be focused on saving people money. As far as a graduated income tax or any tax related solution to address our budget crisis, that would have to be approved by the voters. And so because of the way that TABOR is structured, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And so if that is a direction that the voters of Colorado want to go, I am hearing rumblings of a number of different ballot measures that could appear on the 2026 ballot, and it will be up to the voters of Colorado if we do ultimately approve those ballot measures. But those ballot measures, from my understanding, there's a wide range of ballot measures being explored. There are some opportunities in order to support our education systems.
Thank you so much. Representative Martinez.
Yeah, I think that this question really gets at the root of what we've been dealing with the last couple of years. Is that, we have got to get creative on what we're doing, and being able to still meet the obligations that we, most of us in this room have signed our pen to paper on, and being able to say that we are committed to funding K through 12 education, continue to expanding funding, and being able to put dollars into the districts that need it the most. And right now, we have had to get creative at least a little bit with the last couple of years with the budget being the way that it has been in the last couple of years. But I think, again, moving forward, that has to change. We have to look at all options to making sure that we can continue to expand K through 12 education, being able to put those dollars where they need to be put, and really looking at this. And so I'll be looking very very closely at this ballot initiative if that comes up, as long as with any others, so that we can get the help that we need and put the money where we need to put it.
Thank you so much. And Representative Garcia.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if we see the ballot measures come forward requesting a graduated income tax, really what the voters say about it. Our flat tax and TABOR have been very popular among Colorado voters. In fact, Common Sense Institute's most recent polling shows that 60 to 70% of the voters still, across all demographics, still support TABOR. And so, my concern is that we're seeing some of our wealthier citizens leave the state because it's become unaffordable for them. They're feeling taxed. They're feeling the pinch of their businesses. We're seeing lots of businesses leaving. Oil and gas revenues, which fund our schools, are going down. And so there's some concerns around that. So I think, it's going to be up to the voters ultimately. And, barring that, we need to continue being creative and making sure, funding K-12 education is a constitutional mandate. So we only have so much money. We're going to have to figure out our priorities and make sure that we continue funding K-12 without going back to the BS factor years.
All right. So this is a question specifically for Senator Bright and Representative Lukens, but if feel free to chime in for the rest of the panelists if you want to add to it, because we have about 5 minutes or so for this one. In August, a Board of Cooperative Education Services, BOCES, authorized what is its leaders have called Colorado's first public Christian school, surprising state education officials and members of the public. Are you concerned about this development? And if so, what do you think should be done about it?
You're going to let me go first. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the question. And I really think that this speaks to the heart of all Coloradoans and the belief systems that they hold. Should we allow or rely on public funding for public education to fund schools that are religiously oriented? It's a good question, and I don't think we're going to find an answer here at this debate. We're not going to also come to an answer, I don't believe, this year. I do believe that the reason why educational organizations that have a religious affiliation choose not to accept public funding is because along with that comes strings. And, while those schools are chartered to provide a great education, they also want to do their own thing when it comes to extracurricular activities. And so they don't want to be told that they can't. And so it's tough for them to then accept that public funding. So it's interesting when folks like the case that you mentioned and folks are trying to test that line and see where Colorado really sits with regard to its separation of church and state. So I'm anxious to see how it goes. Quite honestly, I am not partial in one way or the other, but I'm anxious to see what happens and what Colorado thinks about this.
Thank you for the question, and this is certainly an ongoing and fairly timely topic, and so something that I will certainly be tracking as we continue. Before getting elected, I was a social studies teacher. I have taught AP Government. I know that our country was founded on the separation of church and state, and public schools are funded by taxpayers. And when we are a government entity, it is important that we have separation of church and state. So that is something that is a core tenet of our democracy, and certainly something that I used to teach in AP Government class as well. And so I will certainly be tracking this situation.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in before we move on to the next question? All right.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say that the 10th Court of Appeals, this is all federal. We'll see how it plays out. But the 10th Circuit Court has already said we've set a good kind of bar for what it should be for public schools, like Rep. Lukens was saying. So this really is going to come down to the SCOTUS. And given the way things are going federally, certainly we can project what would happen. But what does happen is that means that now the government is responsible for regulating private schools. And so that would certainly be very unique and different. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in. We'll see where the feds go. But yes, we will all be kind of keeping an ear to the ground to see what that looks like. Because like Senator Bright said, a lot of times our private and religious schools like to go outside of the public funding because then they're not held to those same requirements that, we will be regulating private religious schools if that's what happens. So.
Thank you so much. Well, we'll be moving on with this next question, specifically for Representative Garcia Sender and Senator Marchman. Governor Polis has said Colorado will opt into a new federal tax credit scholarship under the Trump administration, which provides tax credits for supporting private school students. Do you support this decision, and do you believe the legislature should have a role in approving or shaping how this program is implemented in Colorado? We can start with Senator Marchman.
Great, thank you. I do not support that. I've understood that the governor is saying, hey, if there's money on the table for Colorado, let's bring it. But we have seen time and again when states try to implement vouchers, they are not successful. They end up not helping any of our students or any of our staff in terms of public or private as a whole. And so I don't support it. One thing I've been doing is talking to the gubernatorial candidates to see where they stand on this, because ultimately it will be their decision. I do think the legislature should play a role. There are many ways we could. One way we could is by opening up these, who can accept money to foundations that support public education. So that's an option, right? Like education foundations. So, and there are many others, but we will see how this goes. I do not support what the governor did. I think it is the nose below the tent for something that could take a rough situation for our public school students and make it worse.
Thank you so much. And Representative Garcia Sender.
Thank you. So, I guess coming from the opposite end, I am a supporter of school choice, and I think it's really important for us to keep in mind that, as our demographics shift, we have declining birth rates, we are more at risk of regular public schools closing. Parents are also more savvy consumers, and they are shopping, and they want the best education for their kids. And they're looking at all the options. They're looking at my local neighborhood school. They're looking at the private school. They're looking at homeschool. They're looking at charter schools. And so, we have to figure out how are we going to meet parents' expectations in this shifting climate of school choice. I think, as far as directing where your tax dollars go, I think a lot of people would love to see more options on where they can direct their tax dollars to go. We all have passion projects, areas that we're interested in. And, if there's somebody who really wants their tax credit to go to a child to attend a private school, why not? There's lots of different tax credits that we offer, and this is just another way to offer parents choice.
Thank you so much. Well, we can move forward with our next question. This question is for Representative Martinez, Representative Lukens, and Senator Bright. Last month, Governor Polis proposed creating a new Colorado Department of Higher Ed and Workforce Development, which would require legislation. As lawmakers consider this proposal, what is one responsibility you believe this new department should take on, and one role it should not take on? Do you have any concerns about the proposal? You each have 2 minutes to answer, and we can start with Senator Bright.
Thank you for the question. As we look at the workforce in Colorado as well as the rest of the nation, we're finding that it takes all kinds of jobs, all kinds of educations to get the workforce that we need to make everyday work for all Coloradoans. This is why we're seeing the emergence of career pathways programs for high school students as they're gaining that college education, those college credits, or even those skills to go into whatever workforce they want, whether it's diesel, automotive mechanics, whether it's welding, construction, etc. I like this direction. I think we need to think outside of the box when it comes to preparing the kids today in the career directions that they want to go. Not everybody's cut out for a 4-year degree. So I think we need to make sure that we have provided for that space for those kids who want to head in that career pathway that doesn't necessarily involve a 4-year degree. We also need to make sure that we've covered our bases with our universities and make sure that they continue to provide that education that that folks demand in that direction too. So we need to make sure we've covered both of those.
Thank you so much. Representative Lukens.
Thank you for this question. So this is a bill that we will see this upcoming legislative session in regards to the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development. And so with any bill that comes through the legislative process, every step along the way, we are closely monitoring and tracking the changes that are made and the amendments that are made. And from my understanding, the stakeholding in this concept is extensive. And so I look forward to the conversation we will be having throughout the legislative process as the bill moves through the multiple steps in the House and the Senate, and then ultimately to the governor's desk. That being said, I am just certainly a huge supporter of any workforce development that we are able to do. One of the bills that I'm working on this upcoming legislative session is in regards to expanding our work-based learning in our higher education institutions. I also know that we have a really strong apprenticeship program in our high schools across the state, something that I think is a very exciting program. And I know that a lot of high school students are participating in that more so than most other states in the country. And so we are always looking at avenues to which we can support students in achieving their career dreams. And so this is certainly what I envision the goal of the Colorado Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development to be. And that will be kind of the guiding light that I'm thinking about as we are navigating these conversations this upcoming legislative session.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Representative Martinez.
Yeah, I think that this is a great question. And, really looking at where higher education has gone through in the last 10 years, plus, it's been kind of a roller coaster ride, to be honest with you. There's been years where there's been, a fully funded model, and then there's been years where they've been struggling. And I think, really in the last couple of years, you see a lot of the funding mechanisms have not been there, or where they've been in other areas. But then that also trickles down to these institutions. And you look at some of these smaller institutions, such as Adams State University, Fort Lewis College, Western State University, like all of these are really heavily dependent on the state to being able to help subsidize what they're doing. And a lot of this stuff, really affects them a lot harder. But I think that just goes more into, urban rural issues. But I think, when we're looking at this, I think that there is a push, and I am supportive of this, to being able to get people their degree and being able to get them in the job field faster and being able to cut down that time. And I'm very supportive of that. I've heard a few proposals of where that needs to look, and how that needs to look. And there are some concerns that I definitely have with this. I think looking at the data points, the ones that are being used currently, I don't feel are a good, adequate representation of really where that is. And I think that also you're going to see a lot of these institutions struggle to even obtain the data that's necessary to make the improvement. So I think looking at this from a holistic perspective, and being able to really bring in the partners to the table to really say, is this working? Is this not? Because I think that that's the goal for these institutions, is to be able to do better, being able to provide for their students and being able to get them, a good employment. I think it's something that everyone else agrees with. We just have to make sure that we're doing it in a proper way that makes sense, and that really takes into account bigger institutions and smaller institutions, and really, at the end of the day, keeping the students' interest at heart when these decisions are being made.
Thank you so
All right. So this next question, we have about 5 minutes. So another one of those where feel free to dialogue off of this one, but specifically for Senator Marchman and Senator Bright, federal student protections are shifting, and the Office for Civil Rights is facing a significant backlog of discrimination complaints. Should lawmakers create more options for families in the state to report issues of discrimination they're facing in K-12 and higher education settings?
If it's okay, I'll start. It was one of my bills in 2023 to codify into state law the protections under Title IX as they existed at the time. And so that is what SB 23-296 did. We came back the next year to make sure that training was going to be provided for teachers so that they could both recognize and know how to deal with discrimination and harassment, specifically versus, well, what is bullying, which is another complete term. So as an educator, I got to take my own training. I didn't write the training, but I got to take my own training this year to get that done. As we've seen the federal education department dissolve, so have the civil rights protections for protected classes in our classrooms. And so I know there is a movement afoot to try to beef up our own CCRD, our Colorado Civil Rights Department. I also know that that costs money. And so we're in this tough spot where the federal government is withdrawing services that have been provided to Coloradans and expecting our state to pick it up. And it's going to take money in a budget crunch time when I just said we're just trying to get the basics to our students this year and uphold the commitment we've made to schools. So yes, I believe we need to. Yes, it's in the works. Do we have the money for it? I honestly don't believe we do. And so this is disability, this is all kinds of folks who are left vulnerable with this transition.
Senator Brett?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Just reading the question on its surface. A backlog of discrimination complaints that the Office of Civil Rights is struggling to cover. I feel like if there are citizens of Colorado and or the United States that are struggling to get response for their concerns, we need to look at that system. I'm a proponent of, I'm a systems guy. I love to see systems that help us solve problems. And so if the system that we're using right now is not working to the best benefit of Coloradoans and U.S. citizens, then we need to take a look at that system and make some improvements or add some other options to be able to make that happen. So remove the issues, and if this is a systems issue, let's address the issues within the system that are keeping citizens from being able to exercise their rights.
And then, so I've had conversations with Representative Bacon about this. Representative Martinez, I believe that Representative Bacon has shared some information with you. So if you want, I'll give you some time to talk about what was shared with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been in conversations about that. So happy to answer this as well. So right now, there are legislators that are actively working to codify Title VI stop protections into state law, so that families and students have a clear state level avenue for relief in the absence of reliable federal pathways. Colorado already has a strong foundation through CODA and CCRD, which is responsible for enforcement. Right now, really looking at this, it's our responsibility as state lawmakers to pick up where the federal government has left off. This legislation, we expect to introduce a bill this year that does exactly that and protects Coloradans.
All right. Anyone else before we move on? All right. All right, that's my next question. All right, so the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program is a subsidy that helps low-income Colorado parents pay for childcare. In many Colorado counties, there are wait lists or freezes in place, and thousands of families are waiting to receive these subsidies. At the same time, the Trump administration has put a freeze on federal funding that supports this program. So this is a question for Senator Bright and Representative Lukens. How will you address this? What are you guys looking at right now?
Great question. And this is something that's been absolutely consuming my windshield today, yesterday, this week, last month, and last year. I'm affected by this in a couple different ways. Number one, I own several childcare centers, and our CCAP families that rely on our services for a safe place for them to place their kids while they're going to work is incredibly important. So we've been on a CCAP freeze in Weld County, as well as 18 other counties in Colorado for the last year or more. That has been a product of many different causes, both some federal, some state, some local. What I have seen come to the forefront as the highest likelihood of success to solve this is more of a local solution. If you look at Larimer County, citizens in Larimer County just passed a 0.25% sales tax to help fund childcare for the citizens of Larimer County. I feel like those sorts of solutions are the out of the box things that we're going to have to start thinking about to try to solve this childcare crisis. I convened a meeting earlier this week with legislators, Department of Early Childhood, the governor's office, and many counties to try to solve this very thing. We came up with 12 different options. Some of them are more or less likely to happen, but we're definitely going to walk down that path and try to get some of these freezes unthawed and get these folks back to the low-income childcare subsidies that they need so that they can go to work. Regarding this week's notification from the federal administration that we're going to freeze Colorado, I can tell you that I have looked at this firsthand, and I believe the state of Colorado, Department of Early Childhood, has done a over-the-top great job of making sure that there isn't fraud in our system. I can tell you from the provider perspective, we have to go through so many checks to make sure that our folks are legitimate, that they're real, that they have all the documentation that they need. So I am very confident in the Colorado Department of Early Childhood's ability to prove to the Administration for Children and Families in Washington, D.C., that we are above board when it comes to this. So it's just a matter of laying that out and showing that we are completely compliant, and we can get Colorado turned right back on with CCAP under this current ACF freeze. And I can tell you that the Department of Early Childhood currently has about 3 weeks worth of CCAP cash to spend. And so that tells me that I really hope that this conversation is prioritized and we can come to a solution in less than 3 weeks. So folks in Colorado can continue to have those services uninterrupted.
Senator Brett, before we move on to Representative Lukens, I just want to ask, what are those 12 options that you guys are looking at, or give us an idea of what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks for the question again. They run the gamut from coming up with programs like the state of New Mexico did. State of New Mexico came up with a severance tax on oil and gas that funds early childhood child care for 0 to 5 age kids for all New Mexico families. So if you think about our universal preschool program, that's what New Mexico's universal child program looks like, childcare program. So that's one of them. Another one is to take a look at other programs within Colorado that are essentially overfunded and underspended. Believe it or not, those programs do exist. And so is it possible for some of those programs to maybe loan CCAP some money to try to get them out of the hole that they're in right now so we can get this program restarted? As well as county-led issues of are there counties out there that want to prioritize childcare for low-income families and work in the parallel path to Larimer County and get some programs like that going.
Perfect. Yeah, I knew this was a question you'd be very interested in, Senator Bray. Representative Lukens, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. And this has been the topic that I have been reading up on a lot this morning as well, and just the reality of when these decisions are made at the federal level. We are at the state level are working our hardest to figure out how this impacts Coloradans. And so what we do know is that the CCAP program in fiscal year 2024-2025 helped more than 27,000 kids in Colorado from 18,000 different families in Colorado pursue early child care education. And so we know that this is going to have a huge impact across the entire state of Colorado. And we know that our families with young kids will certainly be feeling this. In conversation with the Colorado Department of Early Childhood, they will continue their efforts that reflect accountability and fraud prevention. And so they have already been working on fraud prevention, as Senator Bright mentioned, and those procedures are already in place. And so verification and reporting processes that are required under law will continue to be implemented as required. And in addition to that, we know that our Department of Early Childhood in Colorado is exploring all options, all legal avenues to ensure that funding continues to serve all children, families, our early child care providers, because we know that they are providing such critical resources in our communities and have such an economic benefit to our communities as well.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on?
Can I
Yeah.
say something
I had
about
a feeling.
I've been watching this really closely and I've been in touch with my Larimer and Boulder County folks pretty regularly on this. And I just want to highlight what Senator Bright said. There is no fraud in Colorado. And as much as I appreciate what the department is doing to highlight that, we already have highlighted that. This is a very punitive, narrow focused way to attack Colorado federally. And so I just want to bring to the top of the room what I heard my colleagues say. 18,000 families will not have childcare assistance at the end of the month. So after January 31, that becomes a workforce issue. That then becomes a healthcare issue for those parents who have healthcare through their employers. This is huge. We have attendance tracking in place. Our state certainly cannot backfill all of this. So I believe, I just wanted to make sure this is certainly a crisis.
Thank you so much. Well, this next question is pretty personal to me as a first generation student, first in my family to graduate college, and came from a low income family. So, for students like me who rely on both financial aid and advising support to stay enrolled and be successful, programs like the Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative, or known as COSI, are a lifeline to economic mobility. How will you ensure that any proposed cuts to higher education funding do not undermine Colorado's equity goals or disproportionately harm students at community colleges, minority serving institutions, and rural campuses? And this question targeted specifically for Representative Martinez and Representative Garcia Sander, but I very much welcome everybody to chime in if they would like. We can start with Representative Martinez.
We'll have Representative Garcia Sander go first since I'm having some issues.
Okay, I'll start. Thank you for the question, Efren. So I too am a first gen college student, first in my family to graduate with advanced degrees. And I took out a small loan to help me through my first BA. And I worked the entire way through college. And I didn't even do college in 4 years. It took me double the time because I also took time off to travel and work. And so, I know how hard it is to make your way as a first gen student when your parents maybe don't have all of the knowledge to support you and, applying for loans and all of that, scholarships and, all the things. And so I certainly understand that. And I think when we look at cuts to higher ed, if there are any, we really do need to look at priorities, and that's across the board. What is the most important where's the biggest bang for the buck, and where can we preserve the most important things in our budget? I think providing students a pathway to school and figuring out how can we preserve the scholarships and the grant funds that are available really should be a priority. And so when things come up as far as if we need to make any cuts to higher ed, where are we making those cuts? Where's the least pain point? Where are the most important things that we need to preserve and maybe make the pain point somewhere else?
Thank you so much. Representative Martinez.
This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart as well. Working within the higher education system for almost a decade and working with students that particularly don't have the funds to being able to go. I think that, the COSI grant program is something that does keep them not only enrolled, but keeps them, active within the system. So I think that, looking at this, I think that this also brings up the bigger discussion on how we're funding higher education in general. And we need to do better with this, because what I have noticed is that, at any point in this process, if there's like a hiccup, if, the Pell Grant's not coming through, or there's a delay in the Cozy Grant, I think that that leads to a certain level of uncertainty for especially first gen students that may not know, they may not have that support unit from somebody in their family or friends to being able to say, hey, wait it out a little bit. Let's see what this does. I think that really is a stressful time, and it leads to more dropouts within the college system. And so I think that, this is really pivotal moving forward. But then also, I really want to make sure that we're addressing, not only the cost of tuition, what Pell Grants are paying for. I know that that's not necessarily on our level, but then also the College Opportunity Fund as well, and saying, is this paying for what we need it to for our students, and making sure that, that they have the funds, they have the resources available to do what they want to do. If that's a 2-year degree, if that's a 4-year degree, if that's later on, that is definitely something that we need to do better on, and reevaluating that system to making sure that, especially those first gen students, that they have the tools, they have the resources necessary so that they can earn their degree, their credential, and being able to get out in the job force. And so, all that to say this in a that was a long-winded way to say that I'm very supportive of the Cozy Grant program. We need to do what we have to make sure that we're protecting that, and then also having that bigger conversation on higher education is funded.
Thank you so much. And before moving on, very much welcome other thoughts from other legislators.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'd just like to add, I really appreciate the question as well as the comments that I've heard so far. Having worked closely with Andy Feinstein, president of University of Northern Colorado, in my district, as well as Dr. Leah Bornstein of Ames Community College here, I cannot trace any intention from either of them to be disparate when it comes to the students that apply and come through their school system. So if there are any cuts at all to either of those two school systems, I am certain that neither of them will advocate for slacking on the equity goals that they have. I feel like that those goals will be prioritized no matter what the funding comes through. So I just want to champion that they will definitely hold that line.
Thank you so much.
All right. So in past years, Colorado has seen more school violence, including a recent shooting at Evergreen High School, where the SRO was called off campus before the shooting. What would further legislative actions or solutions look like, if any, for you as lawmakers? And this is a question for all of you. We can start with Representative Garcia Sander.
Right, happy to start on this. So I have been a teacher, a principal, a district administrator, and I remember in my first couple of years of teaching was when Columbine happened. And since then, paid a lot of attention to school violence, and, it's an epidemic, and, it really is a lot of mental health. And, we need to address that as a society. The last school where I worked at was on a major highway going through our county, and we didn't have an SRO. We were out in the middle of nowhere. My husband also taught at a school that was an hour away from the closest law enforcement. So I think there's not a blanket best response for this, but I do believe, programs like Faster Colorado, and I know it's not everybody's bag of, everybody's favorite thing. But, when we have a lot of rural districts in Colorado, we do need to figure out how are we going to secure and harden those schools so that intruders and people who want to cause harm don't even think about going into schools. I think, we have guards at our banks, we have guards at sporting events, and we don't have guards at schools. And when I was first teaching, I had worked at a bank for 8 years, and parents were like, "Are you old enough to teach my kid?" And it was like, I'm responsible enough to handle millions of dollars, I know that your kids are just as important. I got this. We really do need to be looking at what are the ways that we can support our schools in ways that are legal and acceptable. And I know, like I said, it's not everybody's bag of tea, but across the state, we've got a lot of rural schools that are out there sitting ducks kind of, and we need to make sure that the staffs there have the tools that they need and the training that they need to keep their students safe. Not everybody's in a metro area where there might be a law enforcement officer down the city street. So I think there's not a blanket answer. I think we need to look at lots of different answers that work best for communities. And I'm always a fan of local control and school boards and university and community college boards making the decisions that are best for them on how to make sure they have safety on their campuses.
Representative Lukens.
Thank you. This is a very important question, and I also just want to start out by acknowledging just how tragic the situation was at Evergreen High School and how scary it is in this day and age. And I also want to say to the families that work at schools, have kids at schools, like we are working extremely hard to make sure that our kids are safe at schools. This is certainly a top priority for all of us. In regards to specifically what happened at Evergreen, I know that the legislators that represent Evergreen were in conversation with law enforcement, school district leaders, and have been looking at how can we make sure that this does not happen again? What were the oversights? And what can we do to make sure that our schools are safe moving forward? And so I certainly don't want to talk about what bills other legislators are bringing because I don't, the legislative session hasn't started. I have not confirmed with other legislators, but I do know that our legislators that represent Evergreen were very involved in those conversations, and I'm sure are working very hard on behalf of their communities.
Let's go to Senator Marchman.
Yeah, I agree on all of that. And I'll just say, gun violence is an epidemic. But beside that, what I'm seeing as I work in schools, I work in a middle school, is that if there is a sense of belonging, if things feel good at school, if we take the time to get to know the people who are in our classes, it's easier to mitigate because you can see it better. And I actually see that more clearly in like rural schools where there are smaller groups. So one of the things I'd like to actually see us do to improve safety is actually inviting, kind of modernizing our teacher workforce to make it more of a place that people want to be instead of people want to leave. And then inviting community members in, be they student teachers, apprentices, people who have been teachers in the community. Just bring more folks in because that adds more accountability and community. I think so much of what has happened is we've become isolated and technologically just alone. And I feel like that's part of where we have an opportunity to improve things. So modernizing teacher workforce, bringing more community in, I'm all for that kind of stuff too, in addition to the bullying, harassment, and gun violence prevention.
Representative Martinez, and also, you have a lot of experience on the higher education side, so I'd love to hear that from you as well.
Yeah, I guess I'll start off by saying at first, I echo everything that's been said so far. In regards to the K through 12 level, I think that this is also an argument on why we need to continue to put money into the K through 12 education system and being able to better fund the school districts at the levels that they should have been funded at 20 years ago, and allowing them to decide, what's best for their school district, what's best for their area and their community, and being able to have the resources to being able to make those decisions instead of, having to nickel and dime things or, run things off of a shoestring budget. I think that really gives them the tools and the opportunity to figure out what's best for their community and how to best protect their children. So, I think that all that falls into the same conversation. In regards to the higher education level, I think that, again, that this is an issue that has come up, at least here on campus, and like, what can we do? How do we do it? I think that there are a number of smaller schools, that we have their own police departments that work within the campuses that, again, are run, but and they do a good job with the resources that they have, but they can probably do better, with more funding and more resources there. But they also have a good relationship in with their counterparts, both with the sheriff's office and the local city police as well too. But I think also with that is there's training that needs to happen both with the staff levels that happen across the campuses, and being able to better be able to identify what's happening, what to do in these situations that I think that we can do better on these campuses. But also with that, I think again, going into this is just making sure that we are taking note of what's happened before, being able to work with those campuses that have been affected by this, and really make positive change that based off of those, and making sure that we're doing something that's not just reactionary, but that's something that's going to last the test of time, to for the next 5-10 years, and being able to really protect our students that are wanting just to get an education, and that are having to deal with this kind of violence repeatedly, and that's not acceptable.
And then Senator Bright, and I know you also bring that childcare perspective. So
Yeah, and thank you for the question, and I really appreciate all the comments to date. I am 12 steps away from the front door of my facility, and I sure hope that and that we've put the precautionary steps in place so that our students are safe here as well. I think that a lot of times, with regard to violence that happens in our schools, the violence is what makes the headlines. And often enough, we don't look at the success stories at the same time. And I feel like a lot of those kids out there that are prone to be violent, we're not getting them the resources that they need to solve their issues and help them work through their problems in the first place. And I really would love to see some programs that would help us get to that space and solve the real root of this issue. We need to look around our country, around our state, and say, what success stories are out there in schools today that we can model our programs after, and try to work this from the other side and try to be successful in this space. There are schools all over that have mitigated this problem, essentially reduced the threat of it to nothing. And so, what are they doing that we can learn from, that we can put into place in our schools at the same place? And so, we need to spend more time studying those success stories and implementing those good practices in our schools.
thank you all so much. That is the end of our questioning. Now we are going to move on to audience submitted questions. These are pre-submitted questions, and you'll have 2 minutes each to answer. So first, let's start with this question from an audience member about protecting the freedom to teach subjects that may be deemed controversial or politically deviant. Are there plans for legislation about what public schools can and can't teach? Any of our lawmakers can address this question, but let's specifically send it to our educators in the room, our former educators, Representative Garcia Sender, Representative Lukens, and Senator Marchman. Again, you have 2 minutes. We'll start with Representative Garcia Sander.
Thank you. Let's see. Is that in the comments yet? Just so I make sure I'm answering it. Oh, thank you. Okay, subjects that are deemed controversial or politically deviant, are there plans to legislate on what public schools can and can't teach? So again, I'm a huge fan of local control, and we have Colorado state standards, and there's a process on getting the standards modified and updated periodically. And so outside of that, I think that we should rely on local control to address what curriculum specifically is being taught, what kind of courses are being taught. I think local control is really important. Parents and teachers should be working with their administrators and their school board to decide whether subjects are appropriate for a certain age group, for a certain community. And so, I don't have any plans on legislating that. I don't know that I guess the more legislation that we create around that space, the more regulation there is, and that just tightens up, what academic freedoms there are. And I don't like getting away from academic freedom and local control. So that's all I have to say.
All right. Representative Lukens.
Yes, thank you for the question. At this time, I am unaware of any plans to legislate on what public schools can and cannot teach. As Rep. Garcia Sander mentioned, we do have our state standards that we that are set in place that schools aspire to. I also know that schools have a constitutional requirement to make sure that students feel safe and are able to feel safe enough that they can maximize their learning potential. We cannot take away another student's right to learning because they feel unsafe. And so there, especially, as aforementioned, I was an AP government teacher, and certainly in AP government, we talk about current events, and we work with students to be critical thinkers and read primary sources and secondary sources and make learn from those and make educated decisions based on what they believe to be true. But it's also important to do that while the classroom is a safe environment, that every single student in that classroom is able to maximize their learning potential. So I do know that we have really amazing educators and administrators across the state that are making sure that are working extremely hard to make sure that all students in their community feel safe and valued in order to maximize that learning potential.
Senator Marchman.
Yeah, and I'll just say every year we do hear of, oh, we want to change the standards for this and this and this and this. And I just want to be really clear that constitutionally, like my colleagues have said, I wholeheartedly support what they've said, but constitutionally, it's school boards who get to make the decisions for what curriculum goes in front of their students. I think what this audience question is about whether, kind of what Representative Lukens was saying, whether or not, can we teach it? I teach math, so it's not really very controversial or at all politically deviant. Although it does have deviations. But no, it is not, it is not the same kind of thing. But we do have legislation in place that has happened that sets standards. And the district, so that's what the state does. And then each district can determine what their curriculum is going to be. And if that is out of alignment, that actually ends up in court. And so it's even kind of out of our hands at that point. So, but I just want to kind of explain the process by which we're allowed to make changes.
And Senator Brett, I saw you come off mute there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I so appreciate the comments that my colleagues have given, and wanted to just also echo what Senator Marchman had to say here. Really, this is the best place for citizens to integrate with their education system is at their school board level. We want to make sure that kids are, we've taught kids how to be adults at the end of the day, so when they turn 18, 19 years old and they step out into the world, they know how to be an adult. And so we need to focus on the core items that get them through that space. If there are certain things outside of that parents want to address with regard to their child's education, that's done at a school board level. And I really encourage everyone on this call, as well as all citizens of Colorado, to integrate with their school board and make sure they know what's going on and they know that they have a voice in that space to affect that change that they'd like to see.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next question from our audience. State data shows Colorado school facilities collectively need more than $20 billion worth of capital improvements. Will the legislature take any steps to address that? This question is open to anyone, but would love to hear specifically from lawmakers who represent more rural communities. We can start with whoever would like to start.
I'll kick it off and just state that, I think yes, this is a real problem that we have. And I represent a very predominant rural districts in 8 different counties in the southern part of the state. And so I think, first stating that I think that the best grant program I think did a wonders, and it did a really good job initially. And I think that now we're looking at like what preventative maintenance really looks like, and how do school districts afford to do these things, and that conversation is coming up. And I think again we're facing a really tight budget year again this year as we have in the past 2 years. And so I think that starting those conversations now and really looking at how we're going to address this and making sure that again we don't want to go backwards in with this. We don't want to have students working and learning in school districts and facilities that aren't adequate. I think we can start those conversations now and really formulating a plan that really makes sense and that is inclusive. And that's not to say that urban areas don't have the same issues, because they do as well. But I think again, making sure that we are developing a plan that makes sense, that encompasses what rural needs are, what urban needs are, and really again keeping that student-centered focus on what's going to be best for them in this, and making sure that we're not breaking the budget for these smaller school districts as well.
Thank you.
I'll go next. Thank you. I'll just jump in. So again, my husband and I have both worked in rural schools, and rural schools, the best grant money that was set aside to help support building and maintenance of rural schools, that pot of money has decreased over the years for a variety of reasons. And there's a lot of rural schools that have deferred maintenance, and they were built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and honestly, they've outlived their useful life. But we still have kids there, and with the asbestos and all. And so I think that, as Representative Martinez said, we're going to need to continue looking at ways to help school districts fund that infrastructure. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I know that one of the things that I've thought for a while is something that Senator Marchman mentioned earlier, is we really need our communities to come back to schools. When we ran a bond issue in my district last year, ran it a couple of years before and it lost. The second time we ran it, we made sure that we had the elderly come to things in the school, and the taxpayers that don't have kids, the businesses, and everybody who's part of the community actually come into the community to see the actual infrastructure failures, the deferred maintenance, and the next time we ran the bill, it did pass. But I think that we really do need to bring our communities closer to our schools, so that our community members see that these are the trite saying of our children are our future. We do want our kids to be in safe, welcoming environments to learn and do their best. And that involves everybody in the community supporting the schools and being willing to fund a bond or a mill levy when it comes time.
I'll just add on as well, since I represent Northwest Colorado, and I have 4 counties, and so all of my school districts can be classified as rural schools. And certainly, I have a number of schools that have been transformed because of BEST grants and BEST funding. And so there is not, our BEST grants are funded by a variety of sources, especially marijuana excise taxes. And so those funds are still dedicated to capital funding projects for our schools and will continue to do so. And so I know that there is kind of a theme in Colorado right now, is that there's not enough money to go around, but we are certainly dedicated. I should restate. I am certainly dedicated to making sure that that our rural schools are getting that funding that they deserve in order to improve their facilities.
I'll just pop in, I guess. So yeah, BEST money usually does go to our rural schools, but sadly, and it's not highly publicized, but sadly, each year over the last 2, 3, we have cut our BEST funding, and we've done it to try to balance the budget. And so that's mainly hurting our rural schools. I would also say like rural schools are also existing in districts that are not considered rural. So they're already getting a little less because the public education funding actually supports rural districts, but not necessarily rural schools in the districts. So the rural schools in my districts are struggling with maintenance. But I just want to highlight that the state of Colorado, we cover every single higher ed capital building, and yet we do nothing for our K-12. And that has been something that has been incredibly confusing to me as a Colorado taxpayer for years. I don't understand. So, no, we are not doing enough this year. We are going to have to do something transformative. Other states have taken on these like low interest revolving funds. Our taxpayers are somewhat tax averse because they feel like we keep coming at them because at Tabor we have to ask for money. And we are. And it's the sixth most unaffordable state in the country. So we've got to fix that. But I would like us to see us doing some really innovative ways of supporting our districts and our schools by creating this like revolving fund of a kind that districts, instead of having to go to their voters, they are able to use this revolving fund of some sort. Other states have done it. There are other options. I love a P3 public-private partnership. Let's do more of that. But yeah, the situation we have now with Best and then it continuing to get chopped away without any idea of it. They say we're going to borrow 25 million this year, but then we never pay it back. And so we're completely inadequately funding our K-12, our K-12. And so again, I think that's something that it would be important to talk to all the gubernatorial candidates, because really it's that if they're willing to invest in our K-12 in our K-12, then this would be a good place for them to do it.
Thank you so much. And then Senator Bright, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And great question. And I appreciate the comments my colleagues have given. And I would also echo that the BEST program has funded schools in my district as well. Lots of capital construction has come through the BEST program. Given that, I do believe that all the money that has been afforded to the BEST program wouldn't even take care of 10% of the needs that our state has with regard to facilities and infrastructure. Unfortunately, the budget proposals that I've seen come through for this next school year are significantly also again cutting BEST even farther down. So yeah, we're going to need to find another solution to address those capital concerns that our school districts have. School districts in my area have gone with bond issues to create new schools, and that is an option. But then I've also seen other school districts also here that have failed on bond issues, and so those are voter choices whether they want to fund those things or not. And so I would also add that Colorado does have a way around Tabor. It's not often spoke of, but I highlight it every chance I get, and that's the enterprise funds that exist in Colorado. Those are ways around Tabor. And if you take it all, look at all the revenue that's generated from those enterprise funds, they exceed the total that is generated from our state income tax. And so when you add those two together, Colorado has a higher income tax rate net effect than California does. We need to look at the way that we collect revenue in this state and prioritize it based on the things that matter to Coloradoans. And so I'll work to shine a light on those programs and see what we can do to get funds in those most important places.
Thank you so much.
All right. So this next audience question is from a finance director in a rural school district. And I think this is one you probably, all of you, weren't going to get out of this legislative preview without answering. It's about School Finance Act. So school districts must draft a budget by May 31st, but the School Finance Act isn't finalized until early May. Why can't the School Finance Act be passed earlier in the session and then the rest of the budget figured out? I'm going to leave this open to all of you since you all sit on the ed committees. And whoever wants to start, go ahead. I see Senator Marchman, you're already off mute, so.
I'll go because yeah, this is an issue. We want to do the school finance first. Like I've heard my colleagues say, We are required to provide a public education for our students. It is a top priority. Like I just mentioned, sometimes our K-12 funding gets to be a part of this budget balancing cycle that is not good for students, it's not good for families, and it's not good for districts or communities. So I would 100% favor, I'd run the bill if I thought it'd get signed, in favor of introducing school finance before we do all of the machinations with the budget to try to claw back monies. Because if we can set it aside at the front end, then the rest of the money is for everything else. So that's where I am, and that's why I hopped off mute. I'm pretty hot about that one.
All right, Senator Bright.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Could not have said it better. Constitutionally, per the Colorado Constitution, we are required to fund certain things first, and education is one of them. So why don't we just reserve the first 30 days of each legislative cycle to take care of the things that we're required to do, and then in the next 90 days, take care of the things that we want to do. So I fully echo that sentiment and would love to see school finance prioritized, pass first, and that we're not balancing the rest of the budget on the back of education.
This is one of those where I wish we had someone from the JBC on here. Representative Garcia Sander.
I'll just say ditto to what Senators Marchman and Bright just said. And, I know Representative Lukens is really integral in working on school finance last session. I think I appreciate, again, that all of us on this call have such a passion and heart for education. I think we're all in the same space of, we'd love to see the School Finance Act be passed early on and be the priority for us, one of the top priorities for our budget overall. So I'd be on board with that.
Representative Lukens.
Yes. Thank you for the question. Just a moment of appreciation for the Joint Budget Committee members. None of them are on this call, but our members of the Joint Budget Committee are going to have to make some very tough decisions this upcoming legislative session. We are constitutionally required to pass the School Finance Act, and we are also constitutionally required to balance the state budget. And so I can assure you that we are always working on making sure the School Finance Act is as strong as it can be. And we will certainly be advocating for as much money that can possibly go to education and K-12 education funding. I certainly do not want to make any cuts to K-12 education funding. I think that like the question that you are bringing up also just comes down to figuring out how all of the math works. And there are folks that are nonpartisan staff that work extremely hard to make sure that we are looking at every avenue within the state budget to make sure that we are funding the areas that need funding. So it is so important. It is the top priority. It is why I ran for office, is to make sure that we are getting K-12 education funding. But we also have students at our schools that are on Medicaid, and we need to make sure that we are funding Medicaid. We have to make sure that we are funding our Department of Corrections because that is a public safety issue. The top question that I get about from constituents is issues around transportation and making sure that our roads and highways and bridges are upkept, and we certainly have a vested interest. I-70, the mountain corridor, runs right through my district, through Eagle County. That is like the top question that I get from constituents is how can we make I-70 safer, and how can we address some of these big concerns that we have when we are going on I-70 during ski traffic. And so it is definitely a top priority is making sure that we are funding K-12 education this legislative session. And I think that my answer to your question is we just have to make sure all of the math works.
All right. Thank you all. Or wait, Representative Martinez.
Yeah, I'll chime in, and I think that really when we're looking at this, and now this is going into my fourth year in the legislature, and what I've noticed is again, or I guess I'll state the same as Rep Lukens, hats off to the Joint Budget Commission and all the hard work that they do in this because it is really a lot, and especially in tight budget years. What I will say is that I think that going into this is that we sometimes see projections change from week to week and day to day, and making sure that we get it right. I think is also very critical. And so we look at like last year where the budget was a little bit later than what we had anticipated coming out, and it was because again that they were still crunching numbers, making sure that again that the math is right on this, and that we are making and developing a budget that makes sense and that is also accurate. And I think that comes with pros and cons. And I think that when we're looking at the School Finance Act again, I am in favor of preserving the funding that we've set aside and hopefully increasing those funds as we're proceeding. But also we need to consider everything else that we have to fund as well, and making sure that we're getting it right. What I don't like seeing is where we have to hold something up, or it's already gone through partway through the process, and we have to go back and make adjustments. I think making sure that we are putting in our due diligence, making sure that the numbers are accurate, and developing an accurate budget that represents what we can do, I think is really pivotal. So.
Well, thank you so much. Moving on to our next audience member question. Are there particular legislative weaknesses or loopholes that allow the establishment of a public religious school in Colorado? And will the legislature look to address those this session? This question is specifically for, we'd love to hear from Rep. Lukens and Senator Bright, since you addressed this issue last time. We can go ahead and start with Senator Bright.
Okay, just looking for the question to make sure that I'm getting it right here. So again, the issue comes back to public funding for education that doesn't quite meet public standards. And so if there is something that is creating that relationship where it's bringing church and state a little bit too close, we definitely need to look at that. If the standard exists is allowing that right now because of a loophole, or I can think of this in two different ways. Number one, a church school that wants to get public funding so that it can have more students might make some concessions so that they can do that. On the other hand, maybe a public school that wants to implement some sorts of religious policies is entering it from the other side of the building, essentially. And so we want to make sure that we've guarded both paths into this, and that we're honoring the intent of the rule in the first place. So I would definitely look at any school that applies and make sure that they're honoring the standards that the state of Colorado put forward.
Thank you so much, Representative Lukens.
Thank you for the question. I'm just gonna say that I don't know the answer to this question. So I am happy to look into it. This is part of the reason that I love conversations like this, and I love town halls and the sort, because constituents and folks in the community will ask questions that I don't know the answer to, and it's gonna be a good old I'll look into it and get back to you. Maybe other panelists know the answer.
Thank you so much.
All right. So this was submitted during the event. The JBC has looked at cutting funding in half for part-time and homeschool students. This could cause brick and mortar programs that serve those students to close. Will the idea to cut funding for homeschool students come back this legislative session? And this is specifically for Representative Garcia, Senator Marchman, and anyone else who might want to take this, actually. And we will start with Representative Garcia Sander.
Okay, I'm just rereading the question here. Looked at cutting funding in half for part-time and homeschool students. I don't know if the idea to cut funding for homeschool students is going to come back this legislative session. When we have part-time and homeschool students, I've seen different models up here in Weldon, Larimer counties. There's a location that has homeschool students, but it's kind of like a co-op where they provide parents with materials to check out, social events, elective classes, things like that. And also our public schools often offer our homeschool students to come in and take a class or two to audit for AP or for extracurriculars, or not extracurriculars, but the non-standard content area courses. And so, I'd like to think that we all pay tax dollars for the education of all of our kids. And, I don't know what the JBC is thinking as far as cutting that funding in half for part-time and homeschool students. But I don't know if that'll cause brick and mortar programs to close. I imagine it would if they're going to cut those in half. But often those brick and mortar programs that serve the homeschool and part-time students, they're already thinking creatively and outside the box on how to serve students. So we'll see what happens. Again, I'll have to look into it.
I will pipe in. I've had the benefit of not participating in all of them, but listening to some of the JBC sessions. And indeed, this has come up again, and it is being looked at to be cut in half again. So it would be quarter of the amount of funding. One of the things that comes up about this is the whole concept of online students and part-time online students. And so while anytime you make a change in a budget, you're going to have another thing that pops up as an issue. And if the intention is to save, it looks like probably $24 million by cutting this again in half, I think it could also have the unintended consequence of, in fact, hurting brick and mortar, for the intention of trying to only give money for brick and mortar students. So in other words, they being the state, doesn't necessarily want to give money if there are part-time online students. That's part of what we've kind of been working on, looking at over the course of the last couple of years through school finance. And this is just one more step toward it. So I wasn't a part of the conversations, got to hear it, but just kind of wanted to add that piece to the conversation.
Cool. Thank you so much. We can move forward with the next audience member question. So this question is about declining K through 12 enrollment, which is a statewide trend due to lower birth rates and other factors. Will the legislature address this issue again, or consider the smoothing factor to help districts with declining enrollment? This question is specifically for Rep. Martinez and Senator Bright. We can start with Rep. Martinez.
Sure. Again, I'll reference the rural districts portion of this is that, when we're looking at this like stabilization factor or the or a new averaging talk, that really puts the rural schools at a disadvantage. If a rural school loses 10, 15 students, that can be a 10%. 20% decrease in their population. And so I think that also throws off of their stability for scheduling or budgeting every year, and that makes it really difficult. And so I think that we need to continue to look and give as much buffer space as possible when we're having these conversations, and really making sure that our districts are taken care of, and that what we're doing is making sense, again, not just now, but long term. And so that's something that I fear for as we're having these conversations. But again, trying to give as much buffer space and still providing the resources that we need to making sure that our students are served is really paramount to me.
Thank you so much. And Senator.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. This is a great topic and timely as we looked at this in the School Finance Act. We're in a tough financial situation in Colorado. Yes, there is lower enrollment and attendance at our schools, and so it does need to be addressed. Like, I'm not in favor of dedicating dollars to students that don't exist. On the other hand, within, again, 50 steps of me are 8 classrooms with kids that have teachers in every single one of those classrooms. Not all those classrooms are full, but I still need to pay every one of the teachers in those classrooms. And so we have to go through that delicate balancing act of staffing for the kids that are enrolled in our program. And as an administrator of a program like that, it's really difficult to make those decisions about how many teachers to hire based on how many kids are going to show up in the front door. So there is a push and a pull there. There is a correct middle answer to be found. We need to be very careful in not overfunding students that aren't there. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we've hired the staff and we have secured the staff for the kids that might be there. So I understand that from both aspects and want to make sure that we strike the right balance.
Thank you so. Thank you.
All right, I think we have time for this very last question. Going back and forth on which one I should ask from the audience questions. Let's go with a pretty easy one so we can wrap it up here. So this is an audience member wants to know, will voters have to revote to fully fund the Healthy School Meals for All program, which provides free school meals to all students? Representative Lukens or Senator Marchman, either or.
I'll just say, and I'll pass to Rep. Lukens for sure, but I'll just say I've heard this talked about. This is the beauty of Tabor. We love that our taxpayers have the ability to vote on changes, but that means if we underestimate, just like what Representative Martinez was talking about, if we're not working with actual numbers that are accurate, then we have to go back and ask for more. I would tend to ask for more at the beginning. But I believe that when that went through the process, there was people didn't want to ask for more than like 99 million is what it could seem like. So we actually needed more than that. And it was a decision that was made when we sent it to the voters. And so I do believe that that is probably going to happen.
Yes, I do think that there's going to be an ongoing conversation about this. There was a great article in the Colorado Sun about why we may have to have another ballot-related conversation. But of course, making sure that our students have access to healthy school meals is one of the number one things that we can be doing to make sure that our students maximize their learning potential, is make sure that they have full bellies of healthy food. So we will certainly be having that ongoing conversation as we do with this program overall. And thank you for that question.
All
Can
right.
I chime in also on that?
Yes, of course.
As an elementary principal in school and assistant principal that saw a whole lot of food go in the trash, this is something that I've paid a lot of attention to. I think voters are going to have a hard time the next time this comes around, because Healthy Schools for All, LL&MM, also rolled into it additional monies to fund SNAP benefits. And so I think, when we say it's funding meals for kids, that's one thing. But then when we rolled in other things on top of that, did that extend the program to where it's over budget? So I think voters just want honesty. And I think, when we ask them for funds to fund a specific program, like to feed the children, they want to know that the money is going to where it's supposed to go to. Colorado is becoming more unaffordable for everybody, and asking our taxpayers for that additional tax, we've already asked you twice now. It's kind of like when people say, well, where's the marijuana money? Every time we run a bond issue, where's the marijuana money? Well, they don't understand all the nuances of how that money does or doesn't get spent for schools. But it is going to be a question of how is that money being spent? And you just asked us for millions of dollars, and now at first it was to fund Healthy Meals for All, and then it was to fund SNAP benefits, and now what? And are we lowering the threshold on who's paying for that? So that's going to be a big question for a lot of taxpayers.
All right. Well, that concludes our event. A huge thank you to you, the lawmakers, for showing up and answering these questions. And thank you for all of you in attendance today. I know we can't see you, but really thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Be on the lookout for a survey when you exit. It'll take you 2 minutes and really help us better understand what makes a great virtual event. Once again, special thanks to our event sponsor, the Colorado Education Association, and thanks to our event partner, Young Invincibles. And thank you so much to our amazing co-moderator, Efren. You were just amazing, and we just appreciate you so much. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and good luck with everything in your education. An overview of this event and a recording will be available on chalkbeat.org this week. Thank you again for joining us, and don't forget to sign up for Chalkbeat Colorado's newsletter if you don't subscribe. We'll keep you informed this legislative session. Have a great rest of your Thursday.